The first time Arif stood in front of the mirror wearing his sister's kurta, it wasn't rebellion. It was silence. The house was empty that afternoon. His parents had gone to visit relatives, and his elder sister Mira was at university. The ceiling fan hummed lazily above him as sunlight slipped through the half-drawn curtains. Dust particles floated in golden streaks. He hadn't planned it. He had only gone into Mira's room to borrow her charger. But the wardrobe door had been slightly open. And inside, neatly folded, were fabrics that seemed softer than anything he owned. Pastel pink. Sky blue. A deep maroon with delicate embroidery near the collar. Arif didn't know what pulled him closer. Curiosity? Loneliness? Or something he didn't have words for yet? His fingers brushed the maroon kurta. The cloth felt cool and smooth, like water against skin. He hesitated. Just to see, he whispered to himself. He closed the door of the room. Locked it. His heartbeat was louder than the fan now. He changed quickly, awkwardly, like he was committing a crime. The fabric slid over his shoulders differently than his own clothes. It fell softer. Lighter. It moved when he moved. And then he stood in front of the mirror. For a long moment, he didn't recognize the person staring back. The kurta fit surprisingly well. The embroidery rested gently against his chest. His hair, slightly long in the front, softened his features. He didn't look ridiculous. He didn't look like he was pretending. He just looked different. And somehow, that difference felt closer to something he had always felt inside but never understood. His reflection tilted its head. "Who are you?" he whispered. The mirror didn't answer. But for the first time in his 18 years, Arif didn't feel like he was looking at a stranger. The weight of expectation. Arif had grown up in a house where expectations were clear. Be strong. Be practical. Be successful. Be a man. His father often spoke about responsibility. His uncles spoke about careers. His cousins talked about gym routines and bikes and girls. Arif tried to fit in. He played cricket even though he preferred sketching. He forced laughter at jokes he didn't understand. He lowered his voice when he spoke because someone once said it sounded too soft. And every time he passed a mirror, he felt like he was wearing something invisible, something heavier than clothing. A performance. But standing there now, in the maroon kurta, something felt quiet inside him. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just calm. He stepped closer to the mirror. His hands trembled slightly, not from shame, but from realization. He wasn't trying to be someone else. He wasn't trying to become his sister. He wasn't playing dress-up. He was trying to see something. Trying to understand something. Trying to answer a question that had followed him since childhood. Why did he always feel slightly out of place in his own reflection? The first memory. When he was 7, he had once wrapped his mother's dupatta around himself like a cape. Not as a princess. Not as anything. He just liked the way it flowed when he spun. His father had walked in. "What are you doing?" the sharp voice had asked. Arif had frozen. His mother had gently taken the dupatta back. "He's just a child." But the look on his father's face had stayed with him longer than the scolding. Confusion. Disapproval. Something unspoken. After that day, Arif learned to hide certain curiosities. He learned to act more normal. He learned to silence questions. Until today. The knock. A sudden knock on the door shattered the moment. "Arif? Are you home?" Mira's voice. His blood ran cold. He hadn't heard her return. Panic surged through him. He rushed to remove the kurta, fumbling with the fabric, nearly tripping. His hands shook as he pulled his own shirt back on. He folded the kurta as neatly as he could and shoved it back in the wardrobe. Another knock. "Arif?" "Why yes," he called, trying to steady his voice. Coming. He opened the door. Mira looked tired but smiled. Why are you in my room? I needed the charger. She nodded casually and walked past him. Arif felt sweat on his palms. Did she notice? Did she sense something? But she simply picked up her bag and started unpacking. You okay? She asked suddenly. He froze.
Yeah.
Why? You look different. For a second, he thought everything was over. But she shrugged. Maybe I'm just tired. He laughed awkwardly. Different. The word echoed in his mind. Different wasn't wrong. Different wasn't bad. Different was just different. That night, Arif stood in front of his own bedroom mirror. Wearing his usual t-shirt. His usual jeans. His usual expression. But something had shifted. The mirror felt less like an enemy. More like a doorway. He stepped closer and whispered again. Mirror, tell me who I am. This time, the reflection didn't look confused. It looked curious. And curiosity, he realized, was the beginning of truth. After that afternoon, the mirror became dangerous. Not because it accused him, but because it invited him. Arif began noticing reflections everywhere, in car windows, in the dark screen of his phone, in the stainless steel kettle in the kitchen. Each reflection felt like it was asking the same silent question. Are you ready yet? For days, he avoided Mira's room. The memory of that maroon kurta lingered like a fragrance he couldn't forget. But avoidance only made the curiosity grow sharper. One evening, when rain poured heavily outside and thunder shook the windows, the house once again felt empty. Mira had gone out with friends. His parents were attending a wedding. Arif stood outside her door. His hand hovered over the knob. I just want to understand, he told himself. The door opened with a soft creak. The choice. This time, he didn't rush. He stood in front of the wardrobe, breathing slowly. His fingers traced the fabrics thoughtfully, not impulsively. He picked a light blue kurta. Softer. Simpler. Less dramatic than the maroon one. He changed slowly, almost respectfully. As the fabric settled around him, something inside him relaxed again, like muscles that had been tight for years were finally allowed to rest. He walked to the mirror. And this time, he didn't flinch. The reflection didn't look like a mistake. It didn't look like a joke. It looked peaceful. His shoulders were less stiff. His jaw less tense. His eyes less guarded. He tilted his head slightly. And for the first time, he smiled at his reflection, not the forced smile he used in family photos. A small, genuine one. Why does this feel right? He whispered. The rain outside answered with steady rhythm. The journal. That night, Arif began writing. He had always kept a notebook hidden under his mattress, filled with sketches, poetry fragments, half-written thoughts. But this time, he wrote something different. When I look at myself like this, I don't feel like I'm pretending. I feel like I'm removing something heavy. Is this wrong? Or is this honesty? He paused. He didn't know what label to give his feelings. He didn't know if this meant he was someone else. He only knew that when he dressed this way, the noise inside his head became quieter. And when he wore his normal clothes, he felt like he was stepping back into armor. Almost caught. A week later, the inevitable happened. He didn't hear the front door open. He didn't hear footsteps. He was standing in front of the mirror again, this time with his hair slightly styled differently, trying to see how small changes shifted his reflection. And then. Arif? His mother's voice. From behind him. His heart stopped. He turned around slowly. She stood in the doorway. Her eyes moved from his face, to the kurta, back to his face. Silence filled the room. The kind of silence that feels like glass, fragile and sharp. He expected anger. Shock. disappointment. Instead, she looked confused. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. The softness made it worse. 1,000 explanations rushed through his mind. I was just, his voice cracked. He swallowed. "I don't know," he admitted. And that was the truth. His mother stepped inside the room. She closed the door. She looked at him again, longer this time. "You look scared," she said. "I thought you'd be angry." She sighed gently. "I don't understand this," she admitted. "But I'm more worried about why you look like you're about to cry." He hadn't realized tears were forming. He wiped them quickly. "I don't know why I feel like this," he whispered. "I'm not trying to be anyone else. I feel different when I see myself like this." She didn't interrupt. She didn't shout. She just listened. And sometimes, listening is louder than shouting. A mother's uncertainty. "I don't have all the answers," she said carefully. "And your father, he might not understand." The word might felt fragile. "But you're my son," she continued. "Whatever you're feeling, we will figure it out slowly." The relief was overwhelming. Not acceptance. Not rejection. Just space. Space to breathe. Space to think. She gently touched his shoulder. "Just, be careful," she added quietly. "The world is not always kind to people who are different." Different. That word again. But this time, it didn't sting. It felt like truth. The mirror changes. That night, Arif stood alone in his room again. This time, wearing his usual clothes. But something was different. He wasn't hiding anymore, at least not completely. The mirror didn't feel like a secret ally. It felt like a witness. A silent observer of his confusion, his fear, his courage. He stared at his reflection and whispered again. "Mirror, tell me who I am." The answer didn't come in words. It came in realization. Maybe the mirror's job wasn't to tell him who he was. Maybe it was only meant to show him, without judgment. And the rest? The rest he would have to discover himself. After that evening with his mother, the house felt different. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But subtly, like a room where a secret has been spoken and now floats quietly in the air. His mother didn't bring it up again immediately. She didn't treat him differently. But sometimes he caught her watching him, not suspiciously, not critically, just thoughtfully. As if she were trying to understand a language she had never learned. And Arif. He felt lighter. But also more exposed. The outside world. At college, nothing had changed. His friends still joked loudly in the corridors. Still teased each other about crushes and gym gains. Still talked about what a real man should be. Arif laughed when expected. Nodded when expected. Performed when expected. But something inside him had begun resisting the performance. One afternoon, while sitting in the campus cafe, his friend Rohan leaned back in his chair and said, "Bro, why are you always so quiet? You think too much." The others laughed. "Yeah," another friend added, "sometimes you act like, I don't know, too soft." Too soft. The phrase hit him harder than it should have. He forced a grin. "Maybe I just don't shout as much as you." More laughter. The moment passed. But inside, the mirror stirred again. Experimenting with courage. That weekend, Mira surprised him. She entered his room without knocking, something she rarely did, and closed the door behind her. "I know," she said calmly. He froze. "Know what?" She crossed her arms. "About the clothes." His stomach tightened. "You saw?" "No. Mom told me." He looked down. She sighed. "Relax. I'm not here to lecture you." He looked up slowly. She studied him for a moment. Why? She asked, not accusingly, just honestly. He struggled for words. I don't feel wrong, he said carefully. I just feel more like myself. She tilted her head. So you want to be a girl? The question was sharp, direct. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe it's not about being a girl. Maybe it's about not fitting into what everyone expects me to be. She considered that. That's complicated, she said.
Yeah.
Silence. Then she did something unexpected. She walked to her cupboard, pulled out a simple beige dupatta, and handed it to him. If you're going to experiment, she said, half smiling, at least learn how to style it properly. His eyes widened. You're serious? I'm curious, she corrected. And I'd rather you explore safely than secretly. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Support doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a beige dupatta offered quietly. The first honest reflection. That evening, Mira stood behind him as he faced the mirror. Not like that, she said gently, adjusting the fabric over his shoulder. Let it fall naturally. He watched their reflections together. Hers confident. His uncertain. Stop looking scared, she teased softly. I'm not scared. You look like you're about to give a speech. He laughed, genuinely this time. She stepped back. There, she said. He looked at himself. Not alone. Not hiding. Not rushed. And something shifted again. He wasn't just experimenting with clothing. He was confronting identity. Do you think I'm weird? He asked quietly. She shrugged. Everyone's weird. Some people just hide it better. He smiled faintly. Dad won't understand, she added more seriously. The reminder felt heavy. I know. The crack in the wall. The inevitable moment came sooner than expected. A week later, Arav returned home early from college. He didn't realize his father had taken the day off from work. He entered the house quietly. But as he passed Mira's room, he heard raised voices. His name. His heart dropped. You encouraged this, his father's voice thundered. I didn't encourage anything. Mira replied. I just didn't shame him. Arav stood frozen in the hallway. So this is what's happening in my house, his father continued. My son wearing. The sentence stopped abruptly. Arav stepped into the doorway. Silence. His father turned slowly. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Arav felt like he was standing between two worlds, the world of expectation and the world of truth. Is it true? His father asked, voice tight. Arav could lie. He could laugh it off. He could say it was a joke. He could retreat. But the mirror inside him had grown stronger. Yes, he said. The word felt like stepping off a cliff. The room went still. You are my son, his father said carefully. What is missing that you need this? The question hurt more than anger would have. Nothing is missing, Arav replied, voice trembling but steady. I'm trying to understand myself. His father shook his head slowly, confusion clouding his face. This is not how you understand yourself. Then how? Arav asked quietly. No one answered. Aftermath. That night, the house felt colder. No shouting. No dramatic punishments. Just distance. His father barely spoke at dinner. His mother tried to keep conversation normal. Mira squeezed his hand under the table once, silent reassurance. In his room later, Arav stood before the mirror again. His eyes looked tired. But not ashamed. He whispered. Mirror, tell me who I am. For the first time, the answer wasn't fear. It was courage. Courage doesn't mean certainty. It means choosing honesty even when it shakes everything. And Arav had just shaken his world. The weeks after the confrontation with his father were quiet, almost too quiet. The house seemed like a place suspended between normalcy and tension, as if every word and gesture had to tiptoe around invisible cracks. Arav learned quickly which movements were safe, which expressions too daring, which silences too loud. But the mirror, his mirror, never judged. It watched him patiently, reflecting not the expectations of his family, but the shape of his own curiosity, his own truth. A world outside. College offered a different kind of freedom. Even if Arav had to perform one version of himself at home, outside he could let pieces of the other self peek out. A carefully chosen scarf around his neck, a softer hairstyle, a brighter color on his notebook cover. Small gestures, barely noticeable to others, but potent for him. One afternoon, Arav met Simran, a student in his literature class, at the campus library. She had a quiet confidence, a subtle way of observing without judgment. "You always sit here alone," she said, smiling, adjusting her glasses. "Do you like it that way?" Sometimes," he admitted. "It's peaceful. Fewer expectations." She nodded knowingly. "I get that. Some people spend their whole lives performing for others. But peace? That's rare." He didn't mention the kurta or the scarves or the mirror in his room. But somehow, talking to her, he felt seen. Not for the part of him he showed everyone else, but for the part he was still learning to understand. Threads of courage. That weekend, Arav returned home with a small, tentative plan. He had saved enough pocket money to buy a few clothes, simple, gender-neutral fabrics, soft pastels, things he could wear without alarm. He wanted to explore without fear of immediate discovery. At Mira's encouragement, he ventured into a small local boutique. He ran his fingers over silks and cottons, noticing how some fabrics responded to his touch differently, warmer, cooler, lighter, heavier. He picked carefully. A mint green tunic, a lavender scarf, and a soft beige shawl. Back home, he slipped into the tunic. The fabric felt like an embrace, familiar yet exhilarating. He stepped in front of his mirror. This time, his reflection didn't just mirror his curiosity. It mirrored his intent. Arav realized that he wasn't just experimenting for comfort. He was testing boundaries, internal, familial, societal, to understand the shape of his own courage. Confronting the mirror. One evening, as rain painted streaks along the windows, Arav stood long before the mirror. He pulled the lavender scarf around his shoulders, adjusting it until it fell perfectly. His reflection smiled back at him, calm, honest, and undeniably him. He whispered, "Mirror, tell me who I am." This time, he listened. Not for a word, not for approval, not for judgment. He simply felt the answer in the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. You are yourself. You are discovering yourself. That is enough. For the first time, the reflection felt complete. The father's distance. Despite moments of peace, the tension with his father persisted. Dinners were quiet. Small jokes that once filled the room now hung in the air, unspoken. Arav learned to navigate these silences, to meet his father's gaze without flinching, to nod when necessary and retreat when words became sharp. He began noticing small shifts, though. A pause before his father spoke, a quieter voice, a subtle curiosity in the way he watched Arav at times. Not acceptance, but an opening, a thread through the wall of disapproval. Arav clung to these threads. They were fragile, easily snapped, but they were something. A secret shared. One night, Mira knocked softly before entering his room. "You've been more confident," she said, sitting on his bed. "Even with him around." He smiled faintly. "I try. I don't want to hide, but I don't want to fight." She nodded. "That's smart. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, careful, and strategic. Like a river carving stone." He liked that image. A river carving stone. Slow, inevitable, natural. Mira leaned closer. "Do you ever think about showing the world? Not just us?" He swallowed. "Sometimes. But I'm not ready. The world can be harsh." "Then start small," she said, offering him a book of poetry she had been reading. Words are safer than appearances, at least for now. Express yourself here first. Let the mirror guide the rest. Arav accepted it, grateful. Safe, supportive, and patient, everything he needed. Nightfall. That night, lying in bed, Arav thought of the mirror. It wasn't a portal or a trap. It wasn't a teacher or a judge. It was simply a witness. A silent witness to every hidden thought, every tentative step, every small victory and failure. And in that reflection, he saw not a person torn between expectations, but a person quietly, courageously, discovering who they could be. The weeks turned into months. Winter melted into spring, and the rhythms of Arav's life began to shift in subtle, irreversible ways. He had learned the language of the mirror, of silence, of small victories. But outside the house, the world had its own demands. The first challenge came unexpectedly. The college event. Arav's literature department announced a cultural evening, an open mic poetry and storytelling event. Students could present their own works, or perform skits, or even share personal experiences. Mira nudged him one evening, "You should do it. Write something, anything. Share a piece of yourself." Arav shook his head. "I'm not ready for people. Not yet. People won't always understand," she said. "But that doesn't mean they don't deserve to see who you are." He stayed silent, but her words settled like seeds. That night, he began writing. Not stories, not fiction, but reflections, feelings he had never voiced aloud. The textures of identity, the invisible weight of expectations, the subtle joy and terror of simply existing as himself. By the time spring arrived, he had crafted a short poem, raw and honest, entitled "Between Two Shadows." The day of the event. The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Friends, classmates, even professors milled about, chattering and laughing. Arav sat in the back, fidgeting with a pen, a notebook clutched to his chest like a shield. Rohan noticed him. "Arav? You performing?" He shook his head. "No. Just observing." Rohan frowned. "You always say that. Maybe it's time to stop observing and start living." Arav's heart raced. The mirror's words echoed in his mind, "You are yourself. You are discovering yourself. That is enough." And for the first time, he considered it. Facing the crowd. When his name was called unexpectedly, a mix-up in the schedule, he had a choice. Retreat to the wings. Hide in the darkness. Pretend he was never invited. But he stepped forward. The stage lights hit his face. The auditorium fell silent. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the paper with his poem. He looked out, not at the audience, but at the mirror he carried inside himself. "This is you. Speak." Words in the light. He began to read. "I have worn many faces, each stitched carefully. To please expectations, to survive observation. But beneath the fabrics, beneath the labels, a pulse persists, quiet but unyielding. I am not a shadow of their making. I am the echo of my own discovery." His voice quivered, but he kept going. Each line, each breath, grounded him. The auditorium, once a field of judgment, became a space of witnessing. "Mirror, tell me who I am," he whispered at the end. And he felt, not fear, not shame, but clarity. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then genuine. Some classmates smiled encouragingly. A few professors nodded. And Rohan gave a thumbs up from the side. For the first time, he realized that being seen didn't always hurt. Sometimes it healed. Returning home. That night, Arav walked home through quiet streets. Spring smelled of wet soil and flowers. The city was alive, yet calm. He felt the weight of the evening settling inside him, not like a burden, but like a lesson learned. Back home, his father was in the study. He glanced up as Arav entered. "Did everything go well?" his father asked cautiously. "Yes," Arav said. "I read something I wrote. His father paused. And you were nervous? Very, Arav admitted. But I did it anyway. Silence. Then, a subtle nod. Not praise. Not full understanding. But recognition. A crack in the wall. A growing courage. The mirror no longer felt like a secret. Each reflection, each self-exploration, each quiet confrontation with fear became a thread weaving him together. He experimented more with clothing, colors, scarves, and fabrics, learning which expressions of self felt like truth. Sometimes his father noticed and said nothing. Sometimes he avoided the subject. Mira always remained a quiet ally. And Arav learned the power of patience, with himself, with them, with the world. He journaled daily, his words sharper, clearer, bolder. His reflection smiled back, not with judgment, not with mystery, but with unwavering acknowledgement, you are discovering yourself. That is enough. The mirror and the world. By now, the mirror had taught him more than any person could. Not about rules. Not about approval. But about authenticity. Arav realized that identity wasn't a singular label. It wasn't a destination. It was the sum of choices, reflections, and courage to face them. And with each day, each choice, each quiet confrontation with fear and expectation, he stepped further into a life shaped not by others, but by the person he was learning to be. Spring gave way to summer, and Arav felt the world shifting around him, not because anything had changed drastically, but because he had. Each reflection in glass, each whispered moment with the mirror, each tiny act of courage had been layering him into something more complete, more honest. The conflicts at home had softened. His father was still cautious, still distant at times, but he had stopped trying to enforce rigid ideas on Arav. His mother's quiet support remained constant. And Mira, the unwavering ally, had become a bridge between past doubts and present courage. Now, it was time for Arav to see if he could step fully into his own life. The invitation. It began with a simple message from Simran. There's a small poetry gathering tomorrow evening at the cafe near the university. Not a contest, not formal, just people sharing. You should come. Arav stared at it. Fear flickered, the world, even a small cafe, still held the potential for judgment. But then he thought of the mirror, of the poems he had read aloud, of the small threads of courage he had been weaving for months. He typed back, I'll come. That single word felt heavier than any sentence he had written, and yet lighter than any silence he had kept. A new stage. The cafe was dimly lit, with soft yellow lights reflecting on old wooden tables. A few students strummed guitars, others sipped tea, and in the corner, a small stage waited, intimate but inviting. Arav arrived early. He wore a pale mint tunic, a lavender scarf loosely draped over his shoulders. Nothing dramatic, just a small, honest expression of himself. He noticed curious glances, a few whispers. But for the first time, he didn't flinch. He walked to the corner, finding Simran waiting with a warm smile. Relax, she said. You don't have to perform. Just be here. And that was enough. Speaking truth. When it was his turn, Arav stepped onto the stage. The room hushed, not out of fear, but attention. He held the notebook in his hands, feeling the texture of paper, the weight of words. He spoke slowly, clearly, letting each sentence fall naturally. I have lived in mirrors all my life, searching for a reflection that felt like home. I have worn clothes, voices, masks, and silences, each designed to please someone else. But I am learning that identity is not a performance. It is a conversation with oneself, an unspoken truth that grows with courage. I am not someone else. I am myself, in fabric, in voice, in thought, in heart. When he finished, there was silence. And then, applause, gentle, genuine. A few nods, a few smiles. Simran clapped the loudest. For the first time, Arav felt fully seen outside the mirror, fully seen beyond the quiet walls of home, fully seen as someone whole. Reconciliation. Returning home that night, Arav found his father in the study. A long silence followed. I watched the news about the cafe event online, his father said finally. I didn't know it would matter to me. Arif's heart raced. You saw? I did, his father continued, voice softer than ever. And I think I understand a little more. You're not pretending. You're exploring yourself. And I want to try to see it with you, even if I don't fully get it yet. Arif nodded, tears threatening, but he smiled. This wasn't total understanding. It wasn't full acceptance. But it was a bridge. A space where connection could grow. The mirror's answer. That night, Arif stood before the mirror one last time, for now. He wore a tunic, a scarf, and a quiet confidence. His reflection met his gaze. Mirror, tell me who I am, he whispered. And the answer came, not in words, but in feeling. You are whole. You are brave. You are yourself. The mirror reflected the boy who had once hidden behind family expectations, the boy who had trembled in front of fabric and reflection, the boy who had spoken his truth aloud. But it also reflected the man he was becoming, strong, calm, confident, and unapologetically honest. Arif smiled. Not the small smile of curiosity. Not the nervous smile of secrecy. But the full, radiant smile of someone who had discovered that identity is not found in judgment, nor in labels, nor in mirrors alone, but in the courage to step forward into life, one reflection at a time. Epilogue. Life did not suddenly become perfect. Challenges remained. Some friends could not understand. Some relatives whispered. His father's understanding grew slowly, and the world at large continued to demand conformity. But Arif had learned the greatest lesson of all. Courage begins in the quietest of places, in a locked room, in a reflection, in a whispered poem. Identity is not a destination. It is an unfolding journey. And the mirror, once a silent question, had become a witness to truth. And now, he no longer needed it to answer him. He already knew. He was himself.